Hi, everybody. This is Addison Shonland. It is September the 27th, 2024. I'm having a conversation again with Nitin Sarin from Sarin & Co. in India. And Nitin, let's start off
Good
by saying hi.
morning. I
And good
was
e
I was going to say good evening, but then I
th-
realized that we are
right.
on
It's good
different parts
evening
of the
from
world.
me and good morning from you.
Indeed.
So as usual, we haven't spoken for some time now because it's been a very busy summer, but boy, there's no quiet moment in the Indian aerospace business or in the airline business.
That's correct. I keep thanking my stars that I am where I am, just purely because of the amazing experience my team and I are getting by just being in one of the hottest jurisdictions in the world.
Absolutely amazing. So SpiceJet got some money and it looks like they can pay some bills.
Well, SpiceJet has got some money and it has paid some bills, and more importantly, salaries. So that's been some good news that we've had recently with an airline who's really been down in the doldrums for several years now. And hopefully, with this, the amount of money they've been able to raise, they can stay afloat for a reasonable amount of time, get themselves back on their feet, and get themselves self-sustainable. But I do want to caveat, it's going to be a tough ride. The amount of money they've got burns out very quickly.
So the thing that amazed me was not just the amount, but where the money came from. There were some big names there,
Yes,
meaning those pockets might have some more if the company
exactly.
needs it.
But it also means that those pockets will remain very small if they don't perform. So I
Right.
won't be surprised if the terms on which the airline has received the money are very, very stringent.
Right. And of course, the thing that amazed me was given the fact that the Indian, it, we were doing some looking at the data here, and the need in India for new airplanes is so big that
Yes,
literally they can take the entire production from Boeing and Airbus just themselves.
correct, correct.
Maybe you recall that after the Paris Air Show, the last one, at AirInsight, we did a little study to look at the population relative to the number of active airliners.
Yes.
And India is like one airliner to 1.6 million people.
Mhm.
China, which is probably the closest in terms of economic development and regional, is one commercial jet airliner per 340,000 odd people.
Mhm.
So we were estimating just if that ratio were to hold, roughly speaking, India needs over more than what it has now. It needs another 3,500 airplanes.
Correct,
It's
correct.
breathtaking.
It is breathtaking. I agree. Um, Let me tell you what concerns me about that, though. Yes, we may require those aircraft, but is are these orders coming because of requirement, or are they coming because of sale and leaseback money? So that's something to think
That,
about.
yeah, that's a whole separate level of that on the onion, right? Just on the outside skin, India
Correct.
needs a ton of airplanes if that population is the proportion of the population that in other similar cycles of economic
Yeah,
development, if the proportion of the population starts to travel. It used to be,
absolutely.
rail used to be, I think, 50 to 1. Now it's like closer to, is it 30 or 20 to 1 in terms
It's
of
it's
the,
it's it's still a very large number. It is still a majority of Indians travel by rail.
right. Anyway, so I mentioned all that as a backdrop to the SpiceJet investment. Clearly, the information we have is not secret. So I would imagine the investors in SpiceJet have the same ratios, the same information. And as you say, the performance of the airline now has to be at least as good as its peers. The thing that amazes me, and as an attorney, maybe you can explain this to us, how is it that SpiceJet could lock its pilots up and not pay them?
You see, the thing is that's a good question. Now, that's a good question. it's got a lot to do with, I mean, the pilots are free to do whatever they like. And the question is, why didn't they leave? And that's very interesting because I know a couple of them. And at least till a few months or at least a few years ago, they loved working at SpiceJet because they had lots of flexibility. The management, the crew rostering, etc., was very, very flexible. And that's what has kept people there for a very long time. And I mean, that's really the only thing that comes to mind. But beyond that, I think it's also a huge amount of competition in India right now. So if you have a job, you are lucky and you hold on to it.
You're right. It's very interesting. So
But Addison, one thing I just want to point out, if we go back a couple of years just prior to COVID, and we unravel the whole Jet Airways sequence of events, they're very similar. They're very similar. The amount of money that was injected in them closer to their demise or their insolvency was very similar. So, we're talking about less than 300 million or less than $400 million, and we know how quickly that can
sure.
can be burned up.
Right. I mean, India's had some spectacular failures, Kingfisher and Jet being among them.
Absolutely.
But yet the guys that the folks that are running well-run airlines there are doing, but they're doing just amazingly. The data through August was fantastic.
Correct.
Even AirAsia, which is now what AIX Connect, their load factor has dropped below what it was, but it's over 80%.
Right.
And that's amazing. Who doesn't want 80% load factors? Okay, the fares are not high, but if the fares not high, 80% is better than 60%.
Indeed. 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 I mean, it's kind of like a nuclear bomb. It's set itself off, and now it's just going to get more intense as time goes by. So it's very interesting. I'm enjoying seeing how this unravels.
So the next one I wanted to talk about, of course, is the mothership, Tata's Airlines.
Yes.
The Air India Vistara, I guess they're calling it a merger, but it seems like almost like a shotgun marriage. Culturally, they are not anything like each other. And in my experience is that, and you have the same thing here with Alaska and Hawaii. Hawaiian is a leisure carrier. Alaska is seen as something special. It's
Yes.
it's got a higher reputation for service. And the fear generally is I guess the fear generally is that when two different cultures merge, what happens is everybody settles to the weaker culture.
Mm-hmm.
What's going to happen with Air India and Vistara? Vistara is seen as a premium brand, right?
Correct. Correct. You see, this is not the first time it's happened to Air India. Let's go back, 2007, 2008, 2009, when Indian Airlines was merged with Air India, and they struggled. Oh, fine, I'll give them that much credit that it was completely government owned at that time and may not have been the best thought out idea. But coming back to this merger currently, as you rightly saying, there's going to be, and there already is a huge culture shock. Now, I don't want to throw my very kind colleagues from Air India under the bus. I know them personally, and they work their backsides off trying to make this a success. But despite them and their hard work, there is cultural difference between the two entities. And I'll give you one example. This friend of mine is a captain at Vistara, and they are seeing more of this merger happening, and a lot of combination of checklists and systems and manuals, etc. And he's concerned, well, not concerned, but his comment was that at Vistara we're not used to having an aircraft which has anything on the MEL, the minimum equipment list, whereas now we're going to be flying aircraft which have a tremendous amount of items which are not in service. So it's small things like that where these cultural things are going to show up. And let's see. Yes, it's a one hopes that it goes off smoothly for them. It's without a doubt that they are going to face these issues, but let's just hope they can deal with them efficiently, quickly, and cheaply.
Nitin, it's interesting you talk about the pilot's view on this. It just occurs to me that when you have a merged airline and you merge pilot lists, these
Hmm.
guys are all unionized and they've got this thing called seniority, which is like everything to them.
Yes.
And you're going to have younger pilots at Vistara probably flying as captains on 787s that are going to be moved to first officer in the on the big list.
Hmm.
That's not going to go over very well. And that's stuff the passengers don't see,
Right.
but it impacts them at some stage because people are
Absolutely.
going to have sick outs and people are going to do all kinds of things. And of course, there's the yawning demand for pilots in the ME3 in the Gulf.
Absolutely.
If you don't treat me right, I'm out of here. Pilots have got a phenomenal profession in as much as it's exportable everywhere in the world.
Absolutely. And, I'll add to that. Not only pilots, I was with a good friend recently who runs one of the largest MROs in India. And he said our biggest drain of resources is we put in time and money in training technical people. And within a couple of months, they're gone to the Middle East. And he said that's a very real problem that we are facing. And because our salaries are higher, that the tax is much lower. Yes, they
Sure.
say it's no tax, but indirectly they are being taxed, but it's still lower than what they're being taxed here. Quality of life is possibly better. So this is a ground reality which our poor airlines have to deal with.
I tell you what, in the classic game of poker, I see you and I raise you. Listen to this story.
Right.
Getting a ride back to Heathrow after the Farnborough show.
Hmm.
The person I was riding with happens to be an engineer at British Airways.
Yep.
And I said, "How are things going?" Geeks talk. They talk about airplanes. What are you going to talk about? He said, "Well, we're having some big challenges." I said, "What are those?" He said, "Well, BA has hired a ton of engineers from the UAE, from the Gulf." I said, "Well, that's great, isn't it?" He said, "No. This is, by the way, the backdrop here is to the Great Retirement. All the expensive, skilled hands went into retirement, and they're not coming back. They don't want to
Hmm.
come back. Why do I have to go to work at 4 o'clock in the morning? I've got pushed into my pension early, and I'm living the great life." So this guy tells me that lots of people are being brought in to BA's maintenance facilities with all the right paperwork, but it's not real skills. The paperwork may be falsified. He said, "We're having to teach people that are supposed to know, according to the paperwork, what they're doing." So, yes, there is this migration. Another anecdote, I'm talking to a lady who runs an MRO shop in Canada. She said, before the thing you had to understand is that when you have those kind of skills in MRO, you have the master and the apprentice, right?
Hmm.
And that ratio has to be 1-to-1 because you, the master, you're getting paid a lot of money to do the job, and you have to watch over your guy who's working along with you, your colleague. This lady advises me that since the great retirement and the great, the pandemic, she now has one master and 6 apprentices. How much work do you think that one master is doing? Because in this line of work, there's no margin for mistakes. People can
Hmm.
die. So everything has to be watertight. So the whole aspect of this MRO thing and the high skills and the movement of people is a really big issue. And I don't think people are talking enough about what that is. Nitin, you seem to have frozen. Can you hear me? Hello? There you are.
Yes, I think
I don't know
we
if you heard anything I said. You
I
froze for
did.
a minute.
I did. You used the term watertight at that point. Yes.
Right, right. So just this MRO labor skill thing is a big problem. And as I was saying just before you froze there, that I don't think it's being discussed enough in the industry. Anyway,
And there's one more point. Let me add to that. When it's not a one-on-one relationship, you are stepping into the arena of being a trainer. And do you realize that when you are an IATA trainer, you have to spend several months going to training school to be a trainer? You cannot, an ordinary person cannot just go and become a trainer. You have to be skilled enough to train people, irrespective
right,
of what you're training them about.
right,
And that's not happening. When you're a technical person, you have to know how to train other people, where the people are just being thrown into the deep end of the pool.
right. I think this is a very serious issue. I wanted to come back to the airlines. And obviously the big daddy there is Indigo.
Yes, yes,
There's been some senior changes there, and of course, the decision now to fly to Mauritius.
yes.
India is no longer big enough for Indigo. They are spreading their wings.
They're as big as the aircraft they fly.
Right, exactly. I'm waiting for Indigo to announce something from India to probably Durban or Johannesburg. Sean
Well,
Mendes and I were having a chat about this about a month ago.
but
Big
it's,
under,
it's it's interesting to see. Yes, I mean, going back to their management changes, they've got a new chief operating officer from the 1st of November, who they brought in April to, groom him and get him. Well, groom him is a silly term, but get him used to the culture at Indigo. But yes, I think it's fantastic seeing my friends who fly for Indigo, for example. One day they're in Nairobi, the next day they're in. Uh, Singapore. It's quite fantastic how far and wide they have spread their wings. Um, but at recent, conferences that I've had, as you know, we do a lot of aircraft leasing work, and a lot of our clients and interactions are with leasing companies. There is I wouldn't call it concern, but if there's something one step below concern, that's definitely bubbling up under with the leasing community, because Indigo will really have to go out on a limb and prove that they can do long haul wide body operations, number one, and even a business class product on their local narrow body operation. So they are looking at a lot of change in the next couple of years, and it'll be very interesting to see how they manage that. We do a lot of work for Indigo. Let me be very clear about that their legal team is very kind to us, and we do a lot of work for them. And it's incredible what they're facing on a day-to-day basis. It's like running a small country. So it's
right.
very fantastic.
What I find so interesting with the Indigo decision to literally go up market,
Yes,
they're fundamentally changing their product
yes,
domestically, and of course, and they have to for international. So they're creeping up now towards what would be a Vistara slash Air India product.
yes,
And of course, this is a good time for them to do that because the Vistara Air India cultural um, unsettled situation gives Indigo a crack to get in, to catch
correct.
that higher yield passenger. Really, really interesting situation.
Absolutely. And I think it's just a mindset problem which people will have to overcome. I'll be honest, I'll be one of them. The onboard product is a different thing, but it's things like your experience on the ground. When you're flying into an airport like Heathrow, which lounge can someone use? Can they use a lounge? How important is that seamless connectivity of, being connected on Wi-Fi at the lounge, starting your work there, being inconvenienced for about 45 minutes while you're getting on to, let's take an example of an Emirates 777 or a 380. You cross 10,000 feet and you're connected and you work for, 7 hours for the rest of your flight. That is what at least the business traveler wants. And that's the traveler who's willing to pay a fair amount of money for time and convenience.
Right.
That's what they need to tap on.
let's see that. Let's see if Starlink can do there in India what they've been doing everywhere else in the last month or so. To wow, that's be so disruptive. And then
Uh,
you also have a new startup situation there with Fly 91. What's their story?
well, Fly 91's story is quite an interesting story. So they're a regional operator operating ATRs. They have two ATRs at the moment, based in Goa. So they are very focused on holiday travel, um, which even it's which is which is an interesting idea to have. And by the end of this year, they're looking to have six aircraft, and they're very professionally run. I must say, if one were to ask me the difference between other regional airlines that I've seen as well as compared to Fly 91, I think they are, apart from having the old Indian Airlines call sign of India Charlie IC, they they're taking it slow, they're taking it easy, which is the right approach to have.
Yeah. Then and another thing that I wanted to just, I guess we can end off with this item. Something that intrigues me, doing some analysis and research recently, we discovered that there is a enormous gap in the Indian market around business jets.
Yes.
There's, I think it's under 300 business jets in that country, and you've got 2,000 mile north south maximum, and of course it's a big piece of real estate. And if you're running big companies, and India's got some big companies, fast growing companies, and you need to move around, yes, it's all great and dandy to do teams like we're doing here, but in the end, you need to see your customers, you need to see your people. You
Yes.
need to do that, and you don't have time to necessarily fly commercial.
Correct.
It seems like a huge opportunity here.
I agree. I agree. And one example I will give you of the prosperity of Indian companies. Now, I'm not being biased. I'm enjoying being in a position where the United States was the late 60s, early 70s. Um, it's where you look at your investment portfolio, you have done absolutely nothing over the last 2 years, and it's almost doubled. Or if not doubled, it's increased by one fourth. You don't see that sort of success, that sort of economic growth very often. And that's what we are seeing at the moment. So imagine from an investor's point of view, if you're seeing that growth, what the actual company that's growing is experiencing. And of course, all their promoters are looking at these options, these vehicles, these machines, which they could never have ever fathomed before that they would be able to even consider. So we're not talking about a few, 10. We're not talking about a few hundred. We're talking about a few thousand uh, industrial houses who have the ability to purchase aircraft. Now, the question is, are they correctly advised or not? We know aviation is a very peculiar industry to be in. You cannot just go out and buy whatever aircraft you find on the market. You have to look at all other factors as to how long servicing is going to take, spare parts, etc. So we are at that nascent stage right now where as recently as this afternoon, I was on a call with uh, a business house which I had never heard of before. I'll be very honest. I had to Google who they were, and they are into real estate. They are into hospitals. They are into a number of areas, but obviously doing very well because they're looking at buying one of the Challenger series aircraft, and it's very interesting to see. And let me add one more thing. I know I've gone on for a bit. There is a huge lack of financing in that area because Indian banks have traditionally not financed business jets because they cannot repossess aircraft because of a particular law that we have. So any financing that happens is from overseas. But it's time we wake up, and it's time we realize that we need to encourage this.
It's interesting you talk about that. There was some news yesterday that Dassault is now going to open a facility in India to support its military products that are in the
Yes.
Air Force. And we know that Embraer is getting closer and closer. If the C390 order comes in, they're going to put up a facility too. Both those companies make business jets.
Yes. Yes.
How long is it before they have a back room that's now servicing business jets? And oh, by the way, do we have a deal for you? Come take a look at your new Falcon or your new Phenom.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And we know traditionally these companies have survived off their military business. And if that's the first step that they've taken. It's a no-brainer that that's going to be the subsequent step thereafter.
Amazing. Always fascinating to speak with you. Thank you again for spending time with me.
Thank you for having me. It's an honor.
Okay.